listening to the Digitally Irresistible podcast, where we cover the optimization of digital technologies and irresistible people. Brought to you by iCore. Each episode features someone who sheds a little more light on the ins and outs of delivering a great employee and customer experience that has a measurable impact on the business. And now, here's today's guest. Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Digitally Irresistible podcast. I'm your host, Bernie Borges. Today's guest is Ron Doe. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Welcome.
Glad to have you here, Ron. Ron, you have more than 2 decades of experience in CX, including experience with brands, BPOs, and also as a consultant. As founder and managing director of a CX consulting firm, you've worked with brands and BPOs, assisting them with their CX strategy, and that includes delivering CX from South Africa. So, Ron, on this episode, let's discuss why South Africa is an emerging location for CX. But first, as always, let's begin with your introduction. Give us your CX career backstory and how you got to your current focus.
Thanks, Bernie. And great to be here today. I started my focus on customer experience, or CX, within a few years out of graduate school. I was working for a global consulting firm and systems integration firm. I was an engineer by training, and I was helping companies design their voice and data networks. And in the 90s, quite a few companies were beginning to centralize and create contact centers, centralized contact centers. And I was doing a lot of work in that, more technical in nature. But within a few years, I started expanding, working on CRM solutions, self-service solutions for those companies, and ultimately got more involved in CX and customer care strategy, operations, organization. And that led to a really fulfilling career consulting with companies on that. But I ultimately felt I wanted to get more hands-on. So I took a role with one of the very large customer care contact center outsourcing organizations, did work globally, ran operations, worked and managed client relationships, sold, took on a number of other functions, did that for a number of years. And then finally, sort of the entrepreneurial and bug and the consulting knack that I had developed early in my career kicked in, and I formed Lookout Advisors. And we are a boutique CX-focused consultancy, very experienced professionals focusing on CX transformation, contact center optimization for companies that have contact centers that service their own customers and consumers. And then we also work with companies that provide services, CX services, like outsourcing firms and CX technology companies.
Terrific. Great background, Ron. I love the fact that you got your fingernails dirty actually in operations, in contact center operations. That's great. And that lends tremendously to your credentials.
Thank you.
Now, Ron, you are a champion for CX delivery from South Africa. So let's talk about that. Why are you such a champion for South Africa for CX?
Well, thank you for giving me the chance. I've worked all around the globe, and so I can speak and have worked in virtually every geography. But South Africa is an exciting country, and you caught me at a great time. I'm actually leaving in just 2 days to go to a conference and to visit a client in South Africa. So great timing. I started getting involved in South Africa several years ago with a client and also with the industry association there, BPESA, which represents the customer care and other outsourcing services industry. South Africa is unique in a few different ways. It's considered an offshore geography and has low cost, only modestly higher than very traditional, oftentimes more well-known offshore geographies, but very much lower cost typically than nearshore Americas. South Africa is also very sophisticated and has a very stable business environment and infrastructure. The banking industry there is world-class. Technology infrastructure, including fiber optic network connectivity east, west, and north is also world-class. It's easy to do business with. The government and the customer care and outsourcing industries have really collaborated to bring new jobs to the country and to attract businesses and investors. The labor market is also very strong. Population of over 60 million, yet unfortunately, good for the outsourcing industry and care, unemployment is over 30%,
Wow.
particularly with youth. And so there's a lot of demand for jobs. It's straightforward to attract and get the right talent and to retain them. It's estimated over 250,000 people in South Africa work in the customer care and outsourcing industry, but there's a large headroom for growth. It's not
Okay.
a saturated industry by any means in South Africa. A lot of opportunity for growth. Education is very strong, both primary, high school, university, but also a number of trade schools and two-year universities that bring along talent. There's three very large metropolitan areas in South Africa, so the population is very well distributed: Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, but there's a number of second and third tier cities. One of the last things to really highlight are the just strong language capabilities in South Africa. It really sets it apart. Native English language. English is the native language of millions of South Africans, and it's really the primary language of education and business. The South African accent is a strength, not a weakness. It's sort of a British accent.
Yep.
Most customers find it very appealing and enjoyable to talk to, sort of like a U.S. consumer might be hearing a Caribbean accent.
Yeah.
It has that British and a soothing feel to it.
Yeah.
And another positive is availability of other languages because of the heavy European influence in South Africa and really the whole of the African continent. There's wide availability of French, German, Dutch, Portuguese, and other languages. One of my clients supports, for example, Canadian French and French for France and Belgium from South Africa, and does that quite well. There's a number of expatriates from Europe that live and work in Europe, but more importantly, with South Africa as a hub for the rest of Africa because of its stability and opportunities. And when you look at the map and the countries there, a number of other European languages are spoken in the surrounding countries, and South Africa attracts those individuals.
At iCore, we love being accessible to your customers when and where they want. Seamless and easy, the way CX should be. Discover why top brands trust iCore for their omni-channel support. Smile with iCore. Learn more at iCore.com. Okay, that is a terrific summary of the why you're such a champion for South Africa. Why is South Africa a great place for CX delivery? Let's talk a little bit about what you've seen in recent years on the how. How has it been evolving? How has South Africa actually been evolving as a place for CX delivery? What have you been experiencing among brands and outsourcing companies in South Africa?
Yeah, thank you. South Africa has been a well-established outsourcing destination for 15 to 20 years, but admittedly, historically, primarily for the European market, uh, and in part, great connectivity to the UK, to the Netherlands, and to Germany. So there was a lot of heritage and a lot of support for the European market. I began to see over 10 years ago now, though, US companies really becoming attracted to South Africa. And I'd say over the last 5 or more years, you've really seen the industry there take off in support of the US market and other global markets. For example, Australia is also a big
Really?
user of South Africa in
Okay.
terms of customer care. And then just last year, for example, South Africa became was by a well-known industry analyst was named as the top number one outsourcing destination for English language customer care services. You see quite a diverse set of companies there. There's a handful of companies, major US global companies, that have set up their own in-house captive operations. Not many, most use outsourcing firms there. And you see a real balance of both native South Africa owned outsourcing firms, some very large with multiple locations and locations across the continent, and then others that have two or three and are boutique operations, two or three locations and boutique operations within South Africa. And then you see some of the very largest global players also having a presence in South Africa. and we're only seeing it continue to grow. And for example, the conference I'm attending this week is all about continuing to attract new investors, new companies, new outsourcers to South Africa.
Have you seen any consistency among the industries that are outsourcing or setting up shop in South Africa, or is it just cross industry?
It really is cross industry. There's a lot of strength in financial services. The financial services industry is very mature in South Africa. Travel, South Africa is one of the major travel and tourist destinations of Africa. So there's a lot of talent in that industry and a lot of capability to support travel companies. Retail, it's very much a consumer driven society and culture. So it's real easy to support global and US and European retailers from South Africa. There's really not, and I was just talking the other day to a company that's serving the utility industry from South Africa. So I haven't seen many industries be excluded from there.
Okay. So when a company is looking to set up shop in South Africa to deliver CX, what are their options? What should they be considering? And also, how do you and your partners at Lookout Advisors, how can you help them?
Thank you. Good question. First is, thinking strategically. As much as I'm a fan and my firm is a fan of South Africa, it's not going to be the right fit for every situation and every company. So first, thinking through and assessing, is it the right fit? Is it where you want to serve your customers from? And that's something we're very good at in terms of understanding South Africa. But we also have a balanced view because we've worked in, again, as I said, virtually every geography in the world. So assessing, is it a good fit? If it is a good fit, then one of the next questions to ask is, do you build or buy, or better yet, or better said, partner? There are companies, major Fortune 500 companies, that have set up their own operations to serve their own customers. More typically, though, both companies that want to service their customers from South Africa or other outsourcers will first look to probably partner in South Africa with an existing outsourcing firm that operates there. And again, the choices are quite varied, a number of local and regional players as well as global players. And my firm has helped a handful of clients assess the marketplace, identify the right strategy for buy versus partner, identify the right partners, help sort of vet those out, identify who's a good fit, identify what geography in what cities to best operate in. There are strengths and weaknesses of the three metropolitan areas. And many companies are considering impact sourcing and how that might factor into that.
Can you elaborate on what do you mean by impact sourcing?
Yeah, impact sourcing is the concept that you're not just bringing, as opening up a contact center, for example, you're not just employing one person and paying them a very competitive wage and a fulfilling career, but you're having a broader impact beyond just those direct employees. You're impacting their family, the communities. And impact sourcing is all about where you can identify situations and pockets where you can have that kind of broader impact. One of my clients is investing in a small rural city outside of the well-renowned Kruger National Park, which is in the northeast of South Africa, fairly rural area, still some sizable population centers that could be well suited, very educated populations, strong English language, but they don't have necessarily the infrastructure, the career and job opportunities, and opening a location there creates that. And we're even seeing that with the infrastructure. This particular city that we're opening up in, or my client is opening up in, hadn't had fiber in the city center previously. Now, because of this new contact center, they're going to have fiber connectivity into the city, and that's going to create whole new bandwidth and just accessibility opportunities for the entire community, not just the workers in the contact center. There's lots of other examples, but again, that impact sourcing is how to have a bigger impact and a broad impact.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Ron, I'm sure we can go on into more detail, and you probably have a plane to catch to South Africa soon. So I want to just go to our last question here. And I think you know that it's customary here on the Digitally Irresistible podcast to ask each of our guests, when you're not working, Ron, what do you like to do for fun?
Family, having a large extended family, and I have 4 kids, just one at home, and the other 3 are all over the country. So we spend a lot of time with them and chasing them down. Despite having had careers and jobs that require me to travel around the US and the globe, I still enjoy that incredibly. Not as much, obviously, of late, but looking forward to select additional travel. And occasionally I still get a run in.
Occasionally, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if it's only occasional, I don't know if that's fun because maybe it's a little on the painful side.
I have that too.
Well, Ron, I want to thank you for taking time out of your hectic schedule. I know that you and your team at Lookout Advisors have a lot going on. You mentioned that you're leaving for yet another trip to South Africa here soon. And just want to thank you for sharing your vast CX experience, your experience and expertise on the South African market for CX delivery. Very insightful, very helpful, and just want to thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the Digitally Irresistible podcast.
Thank you so much, Bernie. I enjoyed being here.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Digitally Irresistible podcast, where we cover the optimization of digital technologies and irresistible people, delivering a great employee and customer experience that has a measurable impact on the business. Brought to you by iCore. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss future episodes.